So anybody who can hear me, if you want to, you can come up here and do anything you want. Read anything you want, sing, dance, that's all cool, I don't care. But just come over here, the sign-up sheet will be right over here on this table next to the orange pen. And yeah, just give us something to watch. And express yourself, I guess that's the important part. However, to start us off, we have Manuel, who is going to do a story and a poem. So everybody give him a round of applause.
I don't think I'm ready. Okay, this first story is dedicated to John Little, Berkeley, California, who's a banker, the Bank of America, whom I interviewed a few weeks ago at his house at Fulton. This story takes place at his house in Fulton, Ohio. It's called Bass in a Pond. A quickening splash, then wiggling ripples. My dad put the basses in last week. They're the size of a thumbnail and now the length of a baby's arm. Can't believe it, can you, Manny? So the ripple means they're feeding on their prey? Yeah, they're eating the minnows. Sometimes when there isn't enough food, they feed on each other too. Cannibal basis! Strange, you look around and it's literally the boondocks here, John. Cornfields in every direction, quiet as a dead country mouse. And yet right inside this pond, a brutal war of survival of the fittest goes on. Everybody for itself and God against all. Don't be so melodramatic. When the basses die, they disintegrate too and become food for the microorganisms. It's a constant recycling process in which there's no predator and prey in the long run because they exchange places and everything becomes a blur in ecological scheme of things. And dude, remember that we're also going to become proverbial food for the proverbial worms. Right. But there's something still unsettling. Like, why do basses grow so fast in such a short amount of time? Well, I guess it's the goldfish principle. You put a goldfish in a bigger bowl, and it becomes larger. Put in a smaller bowl, and it stays small. Of course, once it grows, it can shrink, and there's a definite limit on how large it can become. The bass feeding flashes recur like slivers of miniature lightning while John and Manny talked, casually smoking their cigarettes. 2 weeks later, the basses grew to the size of a full-grown human being. And after several more weeks, the entire pond was filled to the brim with gigantic basses, their chainsaw fins twitching above the surface of the glittering water. The perimeter of the pond stank of raw fish, the smell seeping into the house and soaking every item in the Brito family household, including John's Aikido gi. One day, John's Aikido sensei, Otto, a third-degree black belt who studied at Steven Seagal's West Coast Tenshin Dojo franchise, took John aside in the middle of class when the stench became intolerable. Other students were starting to involuntarily retch as they were practicing their throws and falls. John-san, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave. Are you washing your gi? Remember the etiquette of a warrior. I cannot allow you to step on the mat again until you wash your gi and take a bath. John walked away without replying, changed his clothes, and drove back to his house. No point in arguing with Sensei and telling him about the gigantic basses in the pond. Otto Sensei wouldn't have believed him, or even if he did, wouldn't have cared. John decided to cancel his credit card, which was signed up for the dojo's automatic bill payment, and gave you a slightly discounted rate. Neither John nor any other Brito family member, his parents, his younger brother Kevin, or he suspected their cat Tommy, could detect a fishy stench they had porously absorbed and were emitting in their turn. They resigned themselves to the fact that their drinking and washing water, which was filtered from the pond into the house, had also been infected. As the Brito family members woke one morning from an uneasy dream, They found themselves morphed in their respective beds into human-sized minnows. Flailing wildly, each of them tried to articulate a scream, but they could only release a bizarrely piercing screech from their involuntarily opening and shutting mouth. They were terribly thirsty. As if following some unconscious pack instinct, they wriggled out of their beds and started to exit their rooms into the living room. John and Kevin from their upstairs room, his parents from their ground floor bedroom. Right outside the sliding screen door in the living room, a 20-feet bass slowly emerged from the dried-up pond, now filled up with several intestine-burst carcasses of half-eaten, rotting basses pressed on top of each other like canned sardines. The super bass slithered across the uncut, wildly overgrown lawn and approached the house. Inside the house, the brittles now turned minnows wiggled in a single file toward the garage past the kitchen. A fierce, guttural rumbling was followed by violently jagged ripping across the screen door. The surviving bass burly twisted its way into the living room, smashing up the screen door out of its hinges and cracking the loose wooden frame around the door with a ferocious shove of its massive tail. Entering the living room, it instinctively jumped toward the minnows, which were now clustered on the door into the garage. The minnows desperately bashed their heads against the side of the refrigerator and then against the door, over and over again. Their frenzied screams were reaching a piercing decibel that started to crack the glasses and windows in the kitchen. Liquescent feces fearfully spurted out of their anuses. The bass and assaulted and swallowed each minnow in one quick, precise succession. Its teeth cracking through the minnow's gills and their bodily fluid streaming obscenely out of its mouth. Noises like crunching ribs over broken glasses filled the house, mixed with guttural gulps that sounded like exploding diarrhea. In the distance, as the Davis-Bessie nuclear plant glowed beautifully like a ghostly light of summer heat, Manny's car neared the Brittle home. He stopped about a half-mile away at the intersection. The stench made his head hurt, as if a vicious sledgehammer was repeatedly pounding it. Turning off the ignition, he leaned out of his window and gagged several times. Finally, swinging open the car door and sliding himself out, Manny crawled onto the paved road toward the cornfield. He started to vomit uncontrollably. His puke mingled with blood and his intestines burning implosively. His consciousness was fading. Before he choked on his vomit and expired, the last image Manny had was a misremembered illustration from Max Ernst's surrealist collage novel Un Semaine de Bonte that he, at 18, hallucinated as he overdosed on OJ spiked acid. A gigantic Rodin-like bird swept down and swallowed a fish-faced human being. God's hand then reached out from the sky, grabbed Rodin and ate it. And then something was eating God. Okay, a few poems before I give the microphone to anybody who wants to come up here. First poem is called Dogmatism in its Antithesis. Sexual dogmatists say you should never fuck. You should only fuck once. You should fuck as many as possible, or a variation of should thereof. Since adolescence, I've always thought how you fuck depends on the specific reason and season of your life and temperament. And that if I could, I'll avoid the dogmatists and the dogmatisms, refusing to take vows of celibacy, fidelity, or promiscuity. But as youth flutters into an age palpably conscious of death, and in neither romanticized nor oblivious occasion, I can no longer take the dogmatic vow of taking no vows. Instead, I slowly, dim-wittedly trudge toward the anarchist style of Confucius, who thought, spoke, and acted sincerely according to his particular disciples' needs at the particular moment, swiftly circumventing all systems and unswervingly maintaining common sense, even as I vainly fight the invisible vanguard of my senses. Okay, next poem is called Your Eyes.